Welcome back to CNN special coverage of former President Trump's criminal hush money trial. Court is now in recess for a little bit longer. Tabloid executive David Pecker will be back on the stand in minutes. But before the break, they took a lunch break a little while ago, prosecutors were trying to reestablish David Pecker's credibility after the defense exposed some small inconsistencies in Pecker's statements. I want to bring in jury consultant and president of Decision Analysis, Richard Gabriel. Richard, thanks so much for joining us. There was a moment today where Trump attorney Emile Beauvais drilled down on David Pecker's 2018 interview with the FBI and some inconsistencies between notes from that interview and Pecker's current testimony emerged. How do inconsistencies like that weigh in a jury as they look at a case?
Well, I think it's more about how the jury already has viewed the witness, whether they feel that he's been authentic and sincere and straightforward with them. If they feel that he's been kind of a little bit shady in some of his answers, even on the direct testimony, they don't particularly like him, then they can see those inconsistencies as really key to credibility problems. But a lot of times we do focus on sort of these minor points and whether that really does it. And sometimes it's a forest for the trees type of issue. Jury is really looking at, well, what does this really say? You know, is this really a bad conduct here? What does it really say about the witness? These small inconsistencies tend to not have that great an impact unless there's sort of a big blow to the witness's credibility. So I'm not sure it's going to have a tremendous effect at this point.
Yeah, interesting. Many of the key points the defense is trying to make are very, very nuanced, shall we say. Does the defense run the risk of making an argument too complicated for a jury?
There is that definition. The problem here is that it's trying to establish what is the thing. The credibility is one thing, but I think one of the things they are trying to establish here is just, again, trying to normalize the behavior. So as opposed to saying he's not necessarily credible, they're saying, look, this is something, and it's one of the primary arguments that the Trump team, I think, is making in the case, which is this is just politics. This is not necessarily a criminal conduct. And I think he's hoping to reach some of the jurors on here. This is why jury selection can be so important, because you've got two lawyers, two engineers, people in wealth management, and whether they're going to interpret this testimony to really say, okay, is this actually illegal versus just politics as usual?
Trump's attorney at one point, I thought this was interesting, also apologized to David Pecker over confusion in the questioning of whether Hope Hicks, a former Trump aide, had come up in an interview with the FBI. From your experience, does a defense attorney apologizing to a witness have any sway on jurors?
Typically, no. I mean, it depends how big it is. I mean, you know, it really has to do with how hard they're going. It doesn't sound like they're going after him very hard on this. And so it's sort of this convivial type of thing. There's always this sort of delicate balance, because the attorney can lose credibility also if they go too hard after the witness, because then it highlights their testimony. To a certain extent, I think they want to make a few points and then get this witness off the stand, hoping to make stronger points on credibility with Michael Cohen and some of the other witnesses.
Does the mood change, Richard, in a courtroom when the defense gets to cross-examine a prosecutor's witness?
Well, yes. I mean, what the defense always hopes is that they can take over the case at that point, because obviously the prosecutors control the evidence and the flow of the facts at that point. And so it is an opportunity for the defense attorneys to sort of try to take back control, try to reestablish some of their themes, try to impugn the credibility of the witness, try to score a few points. But ultimately, they have to make a judgment call in terms of how strongly do you then want to highlight the witness's testimony, because the more time and energy you put into cross-examining that witness, also it can tend to highlight some of those things, or the witness can do very well. And so it's a judgment call for a lot of attorneys. Do I stay in or do I get out and cut my losses?
Our team in the courtroom, Richard, they've been paying very, very close attention to the jurors, the 12 jurors, who they say have been following with their eyes the back and forth between the Trump attorney and Pecker, for example. What does that say to you about how intently the jury is paying attention to this case?
Well, we obviously they know it's a pretty important case, so they're very tuned in. And this is the first witness on the stand, so jurors' attention is at its highest. On the first witness, opening statements are critical because they sort of establish the story that both sides are trying to tell. And the first witness it's kind of okay. How does the evidence going to support either the prosecution's case or the defense's case? So they're tracking it very closely. You've got very smart people on this jury who clearly want to pay attention. So I think obviously they're very keen on trying to figure out, what does this witness mean? If this goes on for weeks and weeks and weeks, you may see some of their attention wane. And also, I think both sides have to be careful because sometimes redundancy can tire a jury out and they can kind of go, I kind of got the point here. And they want to move on, even though the attorneys want to score that one little extra point.
And they're paying really, really close attention right now, as they clearly should. Richard, Gabriel, thanks so much for your expertise.